This episode of Lex Out Loud is brought to you by the patrons of Starwalker Studios. Learn how you can support the show at lexstarwalker.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 35 of Lex Out Loud, Writing Science Fiction. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker. This is a podcast for writers, readers, and all lovers of speculative fiction. I'm writing my third novel and taking you along for the ride. As writers, there's only so much we can do to perfect our manuscript on our own. Ultimately, we'll need someone else's eyes on it to find issues we've missed, preferably before sending it off to an agent or publisher. Writing groups, alpha readers, and beta readers are ways we can get this invaluable feedback. In this first of a series of episodes, we'll talk about finding or creating the right writing group for you. So yeah, that's ultimately what we're going to be talking about today, which, by the way, like I said, this is going to be a series of episodes. Right now, I'm planning 3. But I'm fine with it growing to more episodes than that. So if you have any questions or tips pertaining to critiquing, either giving or receiving critiques, or participating in writing groups in general, please let me know. You can give those to me on our Discord server, or you can email me at lexoutloudpodcast@gmail.com. Speaking of our Discord servers, as I mentioned in a previous episode, I recently added some topic rooms to the server. So if you haven't joined us yet, please join us there. And if you have, please check out our new rooms to encourage different topics of conversation and hopefully keep things a little more organized. So we have the Peanut Gallery, which is just for anything that doesn't fit any of the other rooms. We have rooms for discussing books, one for Magic the Gathering, one for music, one for RPGs, one for TV and movies, one for video games. And then we have the writer's room, which is our patron-only room. And I'm always open to creating new rooms if there's other topics that people want to talk about on the regular. I can make additional rooms as well. So I hope you'll check out our Discord server. You can find a link to that in the show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. Also, really quickly at the top of the show, I'll tell you what I'm bringing in as far as creative inspiration. Right now, I'm reading the book Catalyst Gate by Megan O'Keefe. This is the third book in her Protectorate trilogy. So the first 2 books I've actually read twice. I just finished those the second time. And now I'm reading the final book for the first time. So just started that, I think it was yesterday. So I'm really enjoying that. And the only thing I think that I'm watching right now that I haven't already told you about is the accident. I think I just somehow combined the word excellent and accident. I didn't mean to do that. What I meant to say is the excellent comedy show What We Do in the Shadows, which I guess is based on a movie. I never saw the movie, but it's hilarious. And if you haven't checked it out, check it out. I highly recommend it. I believe it's in the 2nd season right now. Really, really good stuff. Really funny. All right. So let's move on to our topic today, which is on writing groups. But also, I think a lot of this discussion, especially the next couple episodes when I start talking more specifically about critiquing, also applies to alpha readers and beta readers. So I guess I can define those terms real quickly. Now, I'm not an authority on this, so this is just kind of my working definitions. I get the feeling that, especially when it comes to alpha readers and beta readers, different authors kind of approach those in different ways. Some authors just talk about alpha readers. Some authors just talk about beta readers. Some authors talk about both. So I think that the terms can mean slightly different things to different people. So here's what it means to me. Now, writing groups can be a lot of different things, but what I'm talking about today is a group of writers who get together to exchange their works in progress and critique one of those works with the intent of improving everyone's work so that they can then submit it to an agent or a publisher. So there's a lot of different types of writing groups and a lot of different goals that different writing groups have, but that's specifically what I'm talking about today. As far as alpha readers and beta readers, these are just simply people who get to read an early, well, not necessarily an early draft, probably what you at the time considered to be the final draft, but these are people that read your story or your book before it's published and possibly before, if you're someone like me and you don't have an agent or a publisher yet, this would be before an agent or a publisher or an editor reads it. So these are the first people to read your book, and the idea being that you're letting them read it to get feedback. Now, like I said, a lot of writers, it seems like, just have one group of people they use for this, and they may call them alpha readers or they may call them beta readers. But then there are writers that have both. And that's kind of how I'm approaching it, which I haven't done this yet. So it may change once I'm actually doing it. But right now I'm thinking I will have both alpha and beta readers. So the alpha readers will be the first group to take a crack at it. And then I would take their feedback under advisement, maybe do another revision or one or more revisions, and then have a group of beta readers who then read it now and give me their feedback. And again, I haven't done this yet, so we'll see how it pans out once I actually do it. Because in my last book, actually, I didn't get past the writing group phase. So at least for me, I would take, like the current novel I'm working on, I would take that to my writing group to Woodshed before I send it to alpha readers. So for me, at least, I'm not saying this is how every writer does it, but for me, first I would do whatever editing I can do myself. And then I would take it to my writing group and see what they think of it, do more revisions, and then I would send it to alpha readers, do more revisions, then beta readers, do more revisions, and then hopefully it's ready to start sending to agents. At least that's the plan right now. And so my thought is, and why I'm kind of approaching it with those three groups is, ideally, most likely, the writing group is going to be composed of other writers. So these are people who can talk the talk and you speak the same language. And, in a lot of ways, I think other writers and or editors are going to be the people you're going to get the best feedback from, the most useful feedback. So that's who I want to hear from first, is people who are in the business, who are in the trade, who speak the same language, and we're all kind of in the same boat together. Because again, their feedback will, in a lot of ways, be the most useful. Because they are fellow writers. So presumably, hopefully, they're a little better able to understand and communicate what it is that's working and not working in your story for them, more so than an average reader might be able to, because again, they're a writer. So they're used to thinking about this stuff in a way that probably most readers don't. So that's the first group of people I want to look at it. And then the alpha readers would also maybe be, ideally would also be fellow writers. But basically, for me at least, alpha readers will be people I collect who are willing to read the book and give me their feedback, and who, like I said, are either writers or they're really hardcore readers, or they're just people that I feel like will be able to handle an earlier draft and will be able to give me the feedback I'm asking for and not give me feedback I'm not asking for. And then the beta readers, once the alpha readers have had it and I've done my revisions after that, the beta readers can be more just your average reader who maybe won't be able to communicate super well to me what they liked or didn't like, or, the feedback may not be as insightful coming from them, but will give me a kind of feel of what's just an average reader going to think of this. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it. For my alpha readers, I want people who are either writers themselves or at least, or editors, or at the very least are people that I think have the skills and the knowledge to be able to read an earlier draft and understand that this is an early draft. It's not the final draft, and give feedback appropriately, and not just pointing out every misspelled word if that's not what I'm looking for, if that makes sense to you. And then, the beta readers could more just be anyone that I trust to read the book and give me an honest opinion. So that's what the terms mean to me, at least. So like I said, that, this discussion, I think, can apply at least somewhat to alpha readers and beta readers as well. Especially, I guess, when I'm talking about in a future episode, when I talk about receiving critiques, because you're going to receive critiques from the alpha and beta readers. So that kind of stuff would apply to that as well. But going forward, I'm just going to talk about writing groups and leave it to you to apply things elsewhere as it's appropriate. So like I said, I'm planning to do 3 episodes. This first episode, I'm just going to talk about writing groups in general, kind of how to know what you're looking for and how to find what you're looking for, hopefully. And then the next episode will be about critiquing, how to give a good critique if you're in a writing group or if you're alpha or beta reading for someone. And then the third episode will be about receiving critiques and how to be a good recipient of critiques. And there's definitely, whether you're giving a critique or receiving one, there's definitely some very important do's and don'ts there that will save everyone a lot of pain and heartache if everyone in the group follows those. But before we can really get to critiquing, or whether receiving or giving, before that, you got to have a writing group. That's the first step. So, the first question might be, why do I need a writing group? Do I need a writing group? So as far as, do you need one? I mean, that really depends on what you're doing and where you're wanting to go. If you're just writing for your own enjoyment and you have no interest in trying to publish what you're doing or in having other people read what you're doing, then you may not need a writing group. And like I said, there's all different kinds of writing groups, and maybe one of the more casual types that's not what I'm talking about today would be maybe something you'd be interested in. So really what I'm talking about here is for those of you who are like me, who you're working on something that you do intend to publish, and so you're wanting to get feedback on that to help you improve it before you send it to your agent or a publisher or whoever you're going to send it to. So if that's you, then yes, you do need a writing group. I think anyone who's serious about writing and wanting to do it professionally needs a writing group, should be in a writing group, full stop. People may disagree with that, but that's what I think. So why? Why do you need a writing group? Well, really, it's the main thing is that I'm just going to assume we're talking about a novel. I mean, just keep in mind, this can apply to any kind of writing you're doing, whether you're writing articles for a magazine or a newspaper, or you're writing short stories or poetry or any kind of writing, essays, professional writing, research writing. Maybe you're doing a research degree and you're writing a research paper. Any kind of writing, you are going to benefit from someone other than you reading it and looking for problems. And a big reason for that is you are very close to this thing you're writing. Like I said, I'm just going to, for sake of conversation, I'm going to assume we're talking about a novel, but just keep in mind, this can apply to any kind of writing. You're very close to it. You've spent probably months, maybe a year or more, working on this novel, writing this novel. You've been reading it, you've been rereading it for a long time. And because of that, there are just things that you're going to miss, that you just will not see. Mistakes that you won't see. Things that are missing that you won't notice are missing. So I don't know, maybe you never describe your main character. And you think you did because, again, you know what your main character looks like. And maybe in an earlier draft, you described the main character, and then maybe for some reason you cut that chapter or that scene or that chapter, I just said that, or that paragraph out. And at the time didn't realize that you just cut out the description of your main character and you now need to put that somewhere else, or, who knows how it happened, but maybe you think it's in there, but it's not. right? And if this is your novel that you wrote, you could read the thing 5 times and never realize that it's not in there because, again, you know what the character looks like. And unlike anyone else reading your novel, where all they know is what's printed on the page, you know all this other stuff, right? That's in your head that maybe never made it on the page, but maybe you think it did, or you don't realize it didn't. So yes, you can, and I think you should take some time off after you finish the first draft before you start editing, a few weeks, ideally a few months. And this will give you some distance from it. This will alleviate some of this problem so that when you say you take 3 months off after you finish your first draft and then you go to start editing it, you will then catch a lot of things that you didn't catch before just because it's long enough that you haven't looked at it or thought about it. It's not so fresh in your mind anymore. I had this experience with my last novel I wrote, Dawn of Endless Night. I don't remember how much time I took between finishing it and doing the first revision. I really don't remember. But what I do know is I did quite a few revisions of it. I did go to a writing group with it. I was part of this wonderful writing group in Seattle. I have no idea if they're still around. I hope they are. They're a great bunch of people and really, really gave me a lot of feedback. I mean, the novel was so much better after they gave me feedback and I made changes than it was before. So it was a really great experience. And I got to read a lot of really cool stuff too. But I did all that. And then I basically got to the point where I would have either started sending it to agents if I wanted to try to get it published, or maybe done one final revision and then started sending it to agents if I wanted to get published. And that's where I walked away from it because I didn't want to try to get it published, which I think I talked about that in the very first episode, why that was, that I didn't want to do that. And then years went by, like a decade, I think. And then I think it was only a couple years ago, I got the idea that, well, maybe I'd start putting it on my blog just to see, maybe I'd get some interest in it. And if people were reading it on the blog and there was enough interest in people digging it, maybe I could do like a print on demand kind of thing and self-publish it. And maybe some people would read it and buy some copies of it. So before I did that, since it'd been years and years and years since I'd even looked at this thing, I wanted to do yet another edit before I started putting it on my blog. So I started doing that. And definitely at that point, it was like reading something someone else wrote. And that was really the point at which I kind of realized how good it was. Before that, I mean, I definitely, there were scenes and chapters that I thought I did pretty well, that I was really happy with. But overall, I didn't have a real high opinion of the book, mainly because I felt it lacked an originality, which was one of the main reasons I didn't want to try to publish it. But after, having all this time away from it, years and years, and then reading it again, it was very much like reading something someone else wrote, which just gave me a very different perspective. And I really liked it. And I thought it was really well written. In fact, I was impressed that I wrote it. And I'm like, man, I hope I can still do this because this is really good. So yes, you can and should do that. Before you start editing, take some time off, get some distance, and that can definitely help. But there's still going to be things that you miss because you wrote it. It came out of your head. And so there are going to be omissions and errors and mistakes and things that just you will never see, no matter how many times you read it. And that's when it really helps to have someone else look at it. Also, if you are going to try to get this thing published and you're going to start sending it to agents or publishers or whatever, you don't want to send an agent or a publisher your first draft. You don't want to do that. I also don't think you want to send them a draft that no one but you has ever laid eyes on. You want to send them as polished a product as you can, right? You want to make it as easy for them to see the potential in this thing as you can, to put the odds in your favor as much as you can. Now, personally, I don't think you should go to a writing group with your first draft. I think that's asking way too much of them. That's not what you want them for. When you finish your first draft and you put it in the drawer for a few months and you come back and you do that first edit, There's a lot of problems you will be able to fix all by yourself right there, and you will be able to clean it up and tighten it up a lot. This isn't really the topic today, but Stephen King recommends at this point, when you're doing your second draft, trying to cut out about 10% of your word count. So let's say your first draft is 100,000 words. Your goal for the second draft should be to cut that down to 90,000 words, because chances are really, really good there's a bunch of stuff in there that doesn't need to be in there, and the book will be better without it. So that's kind of his general rule. And I think it's a good place to start, but that's kind of a side topic. So yeah, you should do at least one revision on your own, all by yourself, preferably again after taking a break from it, to catch all the obvious mistakes that you can find. Spelling errors, punctuation errors, grammar errors, any plot holes, characterization problems, things that you've thought you put in there but never did, stuff like that. Just all the stuff that you can find on your own. Do at least one or two revisions all by yourself. Then you can take it to a writing group to help you further. You want to bring as clean a copy as you can to the writing group. The point of the writing group is to catch the things that you can't catch, not to do all your editing work for you. Also, if the draft that you bring to the group is a total mess, then most or even all of the criticisms that you get on it are going to be addressing stuff that you can probably find and fix on your own. They'll be far too distracted by all the mistakes that you're making to even start to get at the deeper problems. That's what you really need the writing group to help you with. Now, like I said at the beginning of this, not all writing groups are created equal. There are different types for different purposes. So if you go online and do a Google search for, joining or creating a writing group, you will find that there are a lot of different types of writing groups with different goals and purposes and different ways of conducting their business, such as it is. So, the first thing is you need to know what exactly you're looking for and make sure that you find a group that's that. So for instance, you could have one writing group that's for casual writers who just get together to kind of share what they're working on and just to encourage one another. They're not necessarily trying to improve all that much. Their focus isn't so much on getting better. It's more on community and having people to just hang out with and talk writing things with. And they want people to read their stuff and go on about how great it is. But they're not really so worried about getting better, and they don't have any plans of trying to get published or anything like that. So depending on what you're wanting to do, that might be a great fit for you, or it may not be a good fit for you. Some groups get together to write together. So that's another kind of writing group where they'll meet at a library or a bar or a deli or a coffee shop or something, and they just all sit there together and work on their whatever they're writing in the same space together. That's another kind of writing group. That's not what I'm talking about, but that's something that some groups do. Some groups do critique one another's work, but they only allow positive statements. I saw that this is a thing. So, if you're in a casual group looking for encouragement, this could maybe be fine. Where it's like, hey, our rule is you can't say anything bad about what someone wrote. All you can do is point out the things that you liked. So if it's just a casual group and you just want good feelings, that might be fine. However, if you're serious about your writing and you're really looking to improve your craft, especially if you're wanting to be a professional writer and you're wanting to workshop or woodshed this book into a state where you can send it to an agent and get an agent to want to represent it, then being in a group where they only allow positive criticism is not going to be terribly helpful to you. It's not going to get you where you need to be. And in fact, it could be downright harmful to you and to your writing. It's going to overblow the things that you're maybe doing well and completely ignore the things that you're not doing well. I mean, ultimately, I think it's going to be hard to improve much as a writer if your writing group is just blowing a bunch of sunshine up your ass the whole time. Yes, it's good to know what's working and what you're good at and what people like, but that's only going to take you so far, and probably not very far at that, because I mean, let's be honest, you probably already have a pretty good idea of what you're good at, right? I mean, there might be some surprises. You might find out that you're a lot better at dialogue than you thought you were based on what people say. But in general, we usually have a pretty good grasp of where our strengths lie. So if you really want to make progress in your writing, and if you really want to improve your work in progress, you are going to have to man up or woman up and be able to handle the bad along with the good. You're going to have to be able to take negative criticism or personally, I think all criticism is positive as long as it's done right. But, critiques of things that aren't working in your book, you're going to have to be able to handle that. I mean, if you can't handle that, you're not going to be able to handle rejections from agents and editors and whatnot. You got to, one thing I know from hearing a lot of writers talk is you got to have a thick skin. You got to be able to take criticism. And if you can't, you're going to have to learn how, or, this just may not be the thing for you. So you want to know what you're looking for and find a group that fits what you're looking for. So, if you're wanting to go pro and, you're wanting, the harsh truths and you really want to get better, then a group that doesn't critique at all isn't for you. And even a group that only allows positive critiques isn't going to serve you well. So personally, I want to be in a group with other writers who are serious about their writing. I don't want to be in a writing group with people that are just writing for fun, because it's just a whole different mindset. And it's a whole different level of critique that you're going to get and give. I want other writers who are serious about going professional, and I want people who are currently working on an early draft of a book they actually want to publish. Anything other than that is not going to fit my needs and will ultimately be a waste of my and everyone else's time. So again, it's knowing what you want, what you need, and then making sure you find a group or create a group that fits that, where everything's aligned and you're not at cross purposes. So, all those things I just said, I have reasons for all those things. So maybe it'd be helpful to go over that real quick. So I said, I want to be in a group with other writers who are serious about their writing. I'm not interested in being in a group with people who are just doing it for shits and giggles, because again, that's a whole nother mindset than someone who's trying to do this as a profession. If I'm just writing for my own enjoyment, then I don't really have to care what anybody else thinks. And I don't have to be super critical about what I'm doing. As long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing and I like it, that's all that matters. But if I'm wanting to be a professional, if I'm wanting to sell books for a living, then what everyone else thinks matters a hell of a lot. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it matters more than what I think at the end of the day, unless I'm going to buy all my books myself. But yeah, I don't think that'd work. I also said I want to be in a group of people who are working on an early draft of a book they actually want to publish. Again, part of that is mindset. If someone's working on something that they don't really plan to publish, they're just not going to be as serious about it as someone who is. And also, I'm not really interested in a group that has wallflowers in it, that has people that just show up and maybe critique every week or every month, but they never submit something themselves. I don't know. Writing itself is a very, what's the word? It's kind of an intimate thing. You kind of bare your soul a little bit when you write at all. And then to open yourself up to critique is doing that even more so. So to have people that are there and not fully participating, who are dishing it out but never take it, so to speak, that just doesn't sit well with me. And I could just see that causing problems and bad feelings. So why even go there? If I'm going to be in a group with someone, we should all be on the same page, all working towards similar goals. So we should all have something that we're working on, and we should also have something that we can submit for critique. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm not saying that's what you should look for. Your needs may be different, but you definitely should think about what those needs are and what you want, and then make sure that the group you find is that. Because like I said, there are so many different types of writing groups out there. It's almost like everyone who has a writing group has a different idea of what one is or how it should work. And yeah, there's all the logistics too, like how the group is run and things like that. So there's a lot to consider. Another thing you should think about is genre. So if you find a writing group that's full of literary fiction writers and you're writing pulp space opera, that might not be a great fit. They may not be giving you feedback that's really helpful to you. They may be looking down on your work just because it's space opera and they don't think it's on the level of the stuff they read. So yeah, if you're doing genre fiction, that may be important, which isn't to say, if you're writing space opera, that every writer in the group needs to be writing space opera. But I think at the very least, you want everyone in the group to be someone who at least occasionally reads space opera. I mean, maybe not. Maybe, if you've got someone in the group who only reads and writes romance, I mean, they can probably have some valid insights when it comes to the relationships among your characters and things like that. But they're not going to have much to say when it comes to sci-fi tropes and all the other things, world building. And so, they might have something to add, something to contribute, but that seat might be better filled with someone who's in your genre. But again, it just really depends on you and what you're looking for, and it depends on the people involved. Some writing groups, everybody's in the same genre. Some are very eclectic with all people writing all different kinds of things. I also think it's probably a good idea to shoot for a writing group that aligns with your target reader demographic, whatever that is, if you know what that is. So an example of that, for instance, the book I'm writing right now, I am not writing this book for conservative, fundamentalist Christian types, for instance. So I really don't expect someone like that to particularly like my book or even read it to begin with. And so I don't really so much care if such a person likes my book or even what such a person thinks about my book, because I'm not writing it for them, right? They're probably not going to buy the book anyway. And even if they do, they're probably not going to like it anyway. So I don't really care. What I care about is the people I'm writing the book for. What do they think? That's what I want to know. Because I don't need to sell this book to everyone on the planet, right? You can have a target audience that you're shooting for. And it's probably a good idea because it'd be hard, if not impossible, to write something that everybody would love, right? So, such a person isn't the reader I'm aiming at. So having people like that in my writing group isn't going to be terribly helpful. It might even be disruptive or harmful because they're going to be disliking things not on the merit of the work itself, but more based on their own prejudices and biases, which aren't aligning with my prejudices and biases or that of the readers I'm writing the book for. So their feedback is probably not going to be very helpful. It might even be harmful if I take it too much to heart. And, this also goes into genre too, kind of my previous point, coming back to that. So let's say you're writing sci-fi and then you've got someone in your writing group who just hates sci-fi in all its forms. Some of their critiques may not be useful, but some still might be. Like I was saying with the romance writer example, some elements of storytelling transcend genre. All stories have characters, all stories have plots, all stories have settings. So, you can get some good feedback from someone who is not a fan of your genre or who doesn't read your genre. Especially if they're a fellow writer, they can have some really valid feedback. But if you're talking about someone who doesn't like or hates or just doesn't read your genre, they're going to be less favorably inclined toward your story or your book just because of that, especially if they really don't like the genre. So that's going to color their opinions, which, now, you've got this person in the group who hates sci-fi and you're writing sci-fi. And now every critique they give, you have to kind of filter it and ask yourself, okay, how much of this is just they hate sci-fi and how much of this is actually valid? And that's just a lot of guesswork ultimately, because you can't read people's minds. You don't really know. So you'd be better off having that seat filled with someone who reads and enjoys sci-fi. Because again, that's your target audience. You're not trying to sell your sci-fi book to people that hate sci-fi probably. So, their opinions aren't terribly relevant. Also, there are logistics to this to consider as well, especially if you're starting to group yourself. Not so much if you're joining an established group, because this stuff will probably already all be ironed out. But if you're wanting to start one yourself, things like where are you going to meet and how often are you going to meet? How many pieces of work will you critique each meeting? How long will the meetings last? How many meetings will a new member need to attend before they can submit a work for critique? I definitely recommend that you not let people submit on their first meeting. Make them pay their dues a little bit first. Also, that's kind of can be kind of your part of your vetting process, right? They need to prove to the group that they can critique well first, I would think. How will you deal with people who don't do the work if or when that comes up? They don't do the assigned reading, or they never do critiques, but they're asking other people for critiques. If or when that happens, how are you going to deal with that? What will you do with someone who is disruptive? What if someone's just a bad critic? What if they're just really bad at critiquing and their critiques just aren't valuable to anyone? What are you going to do in that situation? What if someone's bad at accepting criticism? What if every time someone tries to critique their work, they get all mad and upset and storm out of the room or flip the table or whatever? How are you going to handle that? How will you handle any conflicts that come up? Who's going to decide who gets critiqued each week, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of logistical things to figure out. And again, if you do some searching online, you can find all kinds of articles and whatnot on, things to think about if you want to start your own writing group to help you out with all this stuff. So hopefully, if you've decided you need a writing group or you want one, you can find one in your area or even online these days that fits your needs and has compatible people with compatible goals in it. That's definitely the easiest. That's the ideal, right? You already find a group that's running and going strong that fits what you need, and you just join that group. However, what I've found is the more that you know exactly what you want, the harder it is going to be to find exactly what you want. The harder it is going to be to find an existing group that checks all those boxes for you. So if you are going to start a group, and if you've never been in a writing group before, or if you've never been in a writing group like the one you want to create before, then I would really recommend attending an existing group first, even if it's not a good fit for you, just to see how another group works, see how it goes, see how it's run, to get ideas of maybe you'll see things that they do that you really like, and you're like, oh, I should definitely do my group that way. Maybe you'll see things that they do that you don't like or you don't think work well, and it'll give you some ideas of what you want to do with your group that you're going to create. Now, you can join a group like this and just critique for other people and not submit your own work if that's allowed. And, you can still do good critiques for the other writers and practicing your critiquing skills. Or you could just be a fly on the wall and just observe what goes on if that's allowed. That way you can see how the group is run, how they handle scheduling, sharing manuscripts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as far as some of those specific things, like I said, I've been in one writing group myself that I was in for a while, but I've also done a lot of research into it online, what different groups do and, how they run it and things like that. So a lot of groups will use meetup.com or a Facebook group to network and schedule and things like that. Now, I got to say, I am not one to promote Facebook. I don't use it myself. I think it's a horrible company and platform, and I don't think you should use it. But just for the sake of completeness, and because I know a lot of writers do use it, there you go. A lot of groups will use something like Google Drive or Dropbox to share manuscripts out before the meeting to people, so people can print off their own copies to edit and critique for the next meeting. Personally, I would recommend having your meetings on the same day and time every time, and either have them once a week or once a month, just because that will be the easiest for everyone to remember, and people don't get confused about what's going on. So, for example, you could say we meet every Monday at 7 p.m. if you want to do weekly, or if you want to do monthly, you could say something like we meet the first Monday of every month at 7 p.m. That way, everybody remembers. You start doing every other month or every other week, people get confused. They're like, are we doing every other week? Are we doing the first and third week of the month, or the second and fourth week of the month? What about a month that has 5 weeks? What do we do? or people will forget, or if you're just week by week picking different days and times. And honestly, this comes more from running role-playing games for groups, but I've just learned through the years that the best thing to do to have the most people there most of the time is to have it the same day and time in a way that's very predictable. So either every single week or once a month is the easiest, because once a month you can say it's the first Monday or the second Monday or whatever it is, and it's going to be the same every month unless there's a holiday or something. But if you try to do like every week or every 3 weeks or something, like that gets confusing, and people will get confused, I promise you. And they'll come the wrong week, or they'll miss it, or whatever. Or if nothing else, it just becomes an excuse that they can use not to show up. Also, I personally think, and I know at least some other people agree with me, at least professional writers probably would agree with me. If you are submitting a work you plan to publish for review to the group, it is perfectly valid to ask people for an NDA, to sign an NDA if you want to do that to protect yourself. That is totally valid. And again, if you're like me and you're serious about writing and you're wanting to connect with other writers who are serious about writing and getting published, nobody in the group should have a problem with this. And probably what should happen is when you suggest the NDA, everyone else should be like, oh yes, I want an NDA too. Like everybody should be on the same page there. If not, if you've got a person has a problem with that, at least if you're looking for what I'm looking for, which is serious professional people trying to publish, they're probably not, right? If they're not willing to sign an NDA, then they're probably not serious, even though they say they are. All right. So I think that's it as far as kind of tips I have for, kind of figuring out what you want in a writing group and how to find what you want. As far as specifically finding writing groups, if you want to join one, good places to look. I already mentioned meetup.com. That is the first place I would start. I've lived in at least 3 cities since I started writing seriously. And I looked for writing groups in all 3 of those cities, and meetup.com in all 3 cases was where I found most of them. You won't find all of them. There will be groups that aren't online at all or whatever, because meetup.com does cost something for the person organizing it. But that's at least a good sign that the person organizing at least is serious, because they're paying a little bit every month just to have the meetup site or whatever. So meetup.com is a great place to start for your city, to see what's going on around you. Any Reddit groups for your city, if you're looking for an in-person group, see if there are any subreddits devoted to your city. For instance, I live in Bellingham, Washington, and we have at least 2 subreddits just for Bellingham that I'm aware of. So that's a good place to look. And, if you don't see any threads about a writing group, you could just post and say, hey, are there any writing groups in town? If you're looking for something online, Reddit is also another place you can look. You can find a writing subreddit and ask there for online groups. Or, if you write in a specific genre like sci-fi, you could find a sci-fi Reddit or a sci-fi writing subreddit and ask there. Also, for completeness, I'll mention Facebook groups is another place you can look, but I don't think anyone should use Facebook. But if you must, there you go. And if you're looking for something local, you can also sometimes have some luck looking on Craigslist. I have seen writing groups advertise on Craigslist before. So that's another place you can check. Also, if you're looking for something local to go to in person, other good places to go physically to look are bookstores and libraries in your area. A lot of times these places will have a community bulletin board that people can post things on. And a lot of times if there are writing groups in the area and they're looking for new members, they will have something there. Also, oftentimes bookstores or libraries will host writing groups of their own that are affiliated with them or not. But I know even we have a local bookstore here in town that has some writing groups associated with it. And I think even the Barnes & Noble in town, they have some writing groups that meet there, and they have a bulletin board. So those are good places to look too. And then, if you're looking for one online, then just the usual ways that you would find something online, go to Google or your search engine of choice and search for writing groups and try to find some that are looking for new members. Which actually, that reminds me, one other thing I want to mention for those of you wanting to start your own group that I mentioned quite a few times in different articles about this that I've read, but I didn't originally put it in my notes for this episode. But yeah, especially if you're going to be looking online, but really starting your own group at all, think about how many people you want, because there's definitely such a thing as too many people. Part of this is going to involve how reliable the people in the group are. Is everyone going to show up every time, or are you only going to have half the people show up every time? It's also going to involve how often people want to submit. If everyone in the group is going to show up every time, and if everyone in the group is going to want to submit every time, then you're not going to be able to accommodate as many people. And also think about how much time you want to give to each critique. So, for instance, let's say my writing group is going to get together for 2 hours, and there are 4 of us. And for the most part, all 4 of us are going to show up every time, and all 4 of us are going to have something we want critiqued every time. Then that means that each person will get about half an hour to critique or to be critiqued. Each piece would have half an hour to be critiqued, which is probably about right, or might even, well, no, that's probably about right, to have 4 people, or I guess 3 people, give their opinion on or their critique of a work. Each one would get 10 minutes for each work. And that sounds about right to me, right? So if you double that to 8 people and you have the same thing going on, everybody's submitting every week, everybody's showing up. Now every piece only gets 15 minutes. And now you've got 7 people trying to critique a piece in 15 minutes. Like that's not going to work. So those are things to think about. So if maybe you have people in your group that don't submit every week, maybe on average people are only submitting every other time you meet, then you can maybe have more people. So that's just something you're going to have to figure out. But the way I would approach it is start with how much time do you want to give each person to critique the thing, and I think 10 minutes is a good place to start. I think after 10 minutes of critiquing, and keep in mind, I guess I didn't mention this, but since we're talking about novels, usually you're doing a chapter at a time. So you're not giving someone 100,000 word novel to critique in the writing group next week. You're giving them one chapter. And the group I was in Seattle, the way it worked was most of us, if not all of us, were writing novels. And most of us that were submitting were just submitting a chapter each week. And that group met every week. So the first week I submit chapter 1 and everybody critiques chapter 1. And then the next week I submit chapter 2 and everybody critiques chapter 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's kind of how it went. And the one variation of that would be maybe I submit chapter 1 and there was a lot of feedback and I completely rewrite it. Well, then maybe I submit chapter 1 again the next week with the revisions. And that actually, I don't remember if it's I don't think it was chapter 1, but there was a certain chapter in Dawn of Endless Night that they really tore apart. And I think I revised and submitted that to that group at least 2 or 3 times. But it was awesome. I mean, that chapter went from probably the most mediocre chapter in the book to one of the better chapters in the book, thanks to all that feedback. Yeah, so that's another thing to consider too, is if you're talking a novel, you're not submitting the whole thing at once, just a chapter at a time. Because again, if you're meeting every week, they only have a week to read all the submissions and critique all the submissions and edit them and be ready. And that, again, it depends on the size of your group and the number of submissions, but that can be a lot of work. It can take a lot of time. I think I was spending at least 3 or 4 hours a week just reading and editing submissions for that group. So that's another thing to think about when you're thinking about how many people you want to submit every week, is think about also the time it's going to take, if you have 4 people submitting every week and they're submitting a chapter, say it's around, I don't know, 3,000 words, something like that, then that means each week everybody has 3 or 4 2,000 word chapters that they have to read, edit, and be ready to critique. So, the more you add to that, the more workload that is, and the more you increase the odds that one or more people won't do it or won't complete it, which isn't very helpful. So, yeah, it's a lot to juggle, but you can figure it out. But I think in the beginning, it's better to start small. You can always add more people if you feel you need to. But I think, first of all, things are going to take longer than you think it will. It will take more time to critique everybody than you think it will. So you might sit down thinking you're going to be there for an hour, and it might end up be an hour and a half or 2 hours until you get used to it and know how long things take. So that's one thing. And another thing is, it's, I think, a lot easier to add a new person than it is to ask someone to leave, especially if the only reason you're asking them to leave is you've decided you have too many people. It's a little different if you have someone who's disruptive or just doesn't gel with the group or whatever. But if literally the only reason you're getting rid of someone is you've decided it's too many people and the meetings are too long, that's going to be a hard thing to do, especially when, it's really your fault, right? You should have planned better from the beginning so you don't have to kind of get this person's hopes up and get them involved and then kick them out. Like, that's not, me personally, I probably wouldn't do that. I would just suck it up and live with longer meetings or limit submissions until someone drops out or something. I don't think I would turn someone away for something like that. Because again, I would see that as a mistake on my part, and someone else shouldn't have to suffer from one of my mistakes, if at all possible. So there you go. There are my thoughts on finding or creating a writing group, figuring out what you need, what you want, what you're looking for, and then trying to find that. If there's anything I've missed, let me know. You can email me, or I'll give you all the contact stuff here in a second. But let me know if there's anything you think I missed that I should add. I can revisit it. And again, in the next couple episodes, I'm going to talk about critiquing, both giving and receiving critiques. So if you have any thoughts or tips or advice for that that you'd like me to include, let me know that as well. The sooner, the better. All right. So if you would like to get a hold of me and give me some feedback, you can email me at lexoutloudpodcast@gmail.com. You can also join our Discord server, and that's a great place to get a hold of me and talk about the show or writing or whatever you like. And you can find the link to that server in our show notes at lexstarwalker.com/LOL. I also have a voicemail you can call. So you could call and leave a message. That number is 951-465-5391. You can also follow me on Twitter at LexStarWalker. And finally, if you enjoy the show, if you enjoy what I'm doing, if you want to support me in my podcasting and my writing endeavors, consider becoming a patron of the show. You can find out more about that on our Patreon page. You can find a link to that in the show notes and get some perks. Depending on the level that you support at, you can get early access to episodes. You can get access to the writer's room in our Discord and things like that. And, hopefully in the future, as things progress, I will be able to do more things for the patrons, especially once I have books to sell. I have some ideas and thoughts for the patrons at that point. But for now, I do what I can. And as always, if you have any ideas or suggestions of perks that you would enjoy as a patron, let me know. I'm always looking for new ideas of ways I can express my gratitude to the patrons. I really appreciate the support of the patrons. The Patreon pays for the hosting of the website and the podcast and the audio files. And I'm really fortunate in that regard that I have enough patrons supporting the show that the only real cost to me to produce this show is the time that it takes. Luckily, I have all the equipment I need. The equipment's expensive. The Patreon would not cover that if I needed new equipment. But luckily, I've been podcasting for a long time, so I have all the equipment I need. But all the the website and the hosting and all that stuff is covered by the patrons. So that's why I'm here. I really don't think I could do this if I had to pay out of pocket every month to do it. It's hard enough getting ahead as a writer the way it is. So thank you so much to the patrons. And they're the reason that we all have this great podcast that we all enjoy. So consider joining the esteemed ranks of the patrons. I really, really appreciate it. So that is going to do it for this week. Again, please let me know if you have any ideas for the writing group and critiquing topic in the future, and I can bring them into the next few episodes as we continue this little arc about writing groups and critiquing. And I meant to say this at the very beginning. It's a little late now, but I guess better late than never. But I just want to reiterate, I am not an expert. I am not an authority. I am not trying to tell you what you should do or anything like that. These are just my thoughts, my ideas. I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I'm not too concerned about a writing group until I finish, like I said, probably the second, if not the third draft of this. But at that point, I will definitely want one. And I think it's unlikely that I will be able to find one that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I will probably end up trying to start one myself. So I've already, done some research into that and thinking about how I would go about that and all that. So I've been struggling for things to talk about on the show lately because I can't really talk a whole lot about the book right now. So I thought this would be something I could talk about, but I do really want to avoid being seen to teach on here because I am not, there are people much better qualified than me to teach you about writing or whatever. But it was something to talk about and it's something I have done a lot of research in and a lot of thought on. So, if this is something you haven't really paid much attention to, I gave you a head start here, some things to think about, but yeah, take everything I say with a grain of salt, use what works for you, discard what doesn't, because at the end of the day, I am just like you. I'm just a guy writing words on the page, trying to get somewhere with that. So I should have said that at the beginning. I meant to, but that's what happens when I don't actually put things in the show notes or the outline, I should say. I completely forget to talk about them. All right. So thanks again for your time and attention. Thanks again to the patrons for your support. And I'll keep plugging away. So hopefully sooner rather than later, you guys will have a cool new book to read. But until then, thank you for listening. And I'll be back soon with another episode. And while you're waiting for that, keep writing.